The story begins in a bustling factory where the air is heavy with frustration. Engineers in polished suits circle around a massive machine, its gears silent and its core lifeless. This was the company's pride, a powerful engine worth millions, now sitting broken and declared impossible to repair. The CEO, known for his sharp tongue and arrogance, stood at the center of it all, fuming at the loss and mocking his own team for their failure. He was used to control, used to power, and he hated feeling helpless in front of his employees. That's when his gaze fell on a woman in simple clothes, standing quietly near the back. She wasn't part of the board, nor was she an engineer. To him, she was just another worker, someone invisible in the grand scheme of things. And that's exactly why he thought she was the perfect target for his joke. With a smirk, he threw out a dare in front of everyone. "If you're so confident, why don't you fix it?" he said, expecting laughter to ripple through the crowd. To him, it was nothing more than a way to humiliate her, a reminder of where she stood in the hierarchy. But what he didn't know was that behind her quiet eyes and modest appearance lay a mind sharper than any blueprint, and hands that had spent years mastering the language of metal, gears, and engines. The room waited for her to stumble, for her to refuse, for her to look small. Instead, she stepped forward without hesitation, her calmness silencing the whispers around her. No one knew it yet, but this so-called impossible challenge was about to turn into a moment that would flip the balance of power in the room. The workers leaned in closer, curiosity pulling them toward the scene. This woman, who usually kept to herself, was suddenly standing in the spotlight of a challenge no one dared to touch. Her name was Clara, and though most only knew her as the quiet employee who swept the floors or carried tools, her life was far more complicated than it looked. She had grown up in a small town where broken tractors, rusted engines, and battered machines were part of everyday survival. While others gave up on old equipment, Clara found joy in taking them apart, listening to their hidden language, and giving them life again. To her, machines were not just metal, they had stories, rhythms, and secrets waiting for someone patient enough to understand. But none of that was known here. In the towering halls of the corporation, she was invisible, just another face in the background. The CEO, Edward, had no idea that the woman he mocked carried years of mechanical genius inside her. To him, this was just another cruel game to keep his pride intact in front of the frustrated engineers. The engine sitting in front of them was said to be the company's breakthrough invention, designed with advanced technology that only a handful of specialists claimed to understand. Millions had been invested in it, and its failure was a ticking clock threatening Edward's reputation and the company's future. Clara's steady steps toward the machine unsettled the room. Every eye followed her, some amused, others whispering doubts, a few secretly hoping she might succeed. Edward crossed his arms, his smirk never fading, confident this would end in her embarrassment. Yet, in Clara's calm expression there was no fear, only quiet focus, as if she already heard something in the silent machine that no one else could. The tension grew, and the factory floor felt like it was holding its breath. Clara crouched beside the engine, her fingers brushing against the metal as though she were greeting an old friend. The engineers exchanged uneasy glances, whispering about how she couldn't possibly understand such an advanced system. To them, this machine was a marvel of modern design, built on layers of technology and guarded secrets. But to Clara, complexity was never a barrier. It was a puzzle waiting for patience. She tilted her head, listening to the faint clicks and hums that others had dismissed as silence, her mind mapping out the tangled pathways of gears and circuits. Edward's voice cut through the air. "Don't waste our time. Even my top engineers couldn't get it working. What makes you think you can?" His words were sharp, but beneath them lingered the fear of failure, a fear he hid behind arrogance. Around him, the workers who had long endured his temper saw something they hadn't expected, a crack in his control. If Clara somehow proved him wrong, it wouldn't just be the engine at stake, it would be his pride, his authority, his grip over the factory. Meanwhile, the engineers faced their own conflict. Some were secretly rooting for Clara, tired of Edward's constant humiliation. Others, jealous of the attention shifting away from their titles and degrees, hoped she would fail so things could return to their order. The tension wasn't only about the machine, it was about power, recognition, and the invisible lines drawn between the so-called important people and those seen as expendable. Clara remained silent, her eyes fixed on the smallest details. She noticed things no one else bothered to see: the faint scorch on a wire, the uneven grind of a hidden gear. Each clue deepened the mystery of why this engine had failed. As the seconds stretched into silence, the factory floor felt like the stage of a battle that was only just beginning. The factory grew colder as the silence stretched on, every sound amplified: the shuffle of boots, the nervous clearing of throats, the low hum of the fluorescent lights above. Clara's hands moved slowly, deliberately, tracing the edges of the engine's frame as if she were reading words carved into its metal skin. The workers leaned forward, torn between disbelief and hope, while Edward tapped his foot impatiently, his smirk starting to falter. He had expected her to hesitate, to give up, but instead she looked more focused with every passing second. The massive engine loomed like a beast refusing to wake, its polished steel hiding a web of fluss. Clara brushed away dust, her eyes narrowing at places no one else had cared to examine. Her silence unsettled the room even more than words could. It wasn't defiance. It was confidence, the kind that came from knowing something others didn't. The engineers began to whisper nervously, their voices trembling between ridicule and awe. "What is she seeing?" One muttered. "She can't possibly." Another whispered, though his voice cracked with doubt. Edward stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Enough games. If you don't know what you're doing, step away before you embarrass yourself further." But Clara didn't flinch. Her hand rested on the engine's core, her gaze locked as though she were listening to its heartbeat. It was in that moment the room realized she wasn't guessing. She was diagnosing, piece by piece, with a precision that none of the trained experts had shown. The tension thickened. Every second stretched like an eternity, the outcome uncertain. Would she prove them all wrong, or would this bold step cost her the respect she had quietly earned in that single moment? The factory floor felt ready to erupt, and all eyes waited for the moment that would shatter the balance. Just as the room braced itself for Clara's next move, a voice broke through the tense silence. One of the senior engineers, a man who had spent years protecting his reputation, suddenly stepped forward. His tone was sharp, laced with authority. "This is a waste of time. She doesn't belong here. If this engine is fixed by someone like her, what does that say about all of us?" His words cut through the crowd, stirring unease. It wasn't just doubt anymore. It was fear. Fear that the truth of their failure would be exposed by someone they had overlooked. Edward's smirk returned, but only slightly. He seized on the outburst, adding fuel. "Exactly. She has no credentials, no training, nothing that makes her qualified. And yet she dares to stand here?" His voice echoed across the factory, his pride desperate to hold its ground. But Clara didn't move, her eyes still fixed on the machine, her calmness a sharp contrast to the storm building around her. Then came the second shock. Clara lifted her head, her voice steady. "This engine isn't broken by accident. Someone tampered with it." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. The idea hit harder than any insult or dare. It suggested sabotage. Suddenly, the stakes were no longer about pride or embarrassment. If what she claimed was true, the company wasn't just facing a broken machine, but a hidden enemy within their walls. The senior engineer's face tightened, his protest turning into silence, while others exchanged uneasy looks. The factory workers, once passive, now buzzed with questions and suspicions. Edward's confidence faltered again, though he tried to mask it with anger. The tension rose higher than ever, because if Clara was right, this wasn't just about fixing the impossible engine anymore. It was about uncovering the truth no one dared to speak. The factory fell into a heavy silence after Clara's accusation. All eyes turned back to the engine, the air thick with suspicion. Clara moved with certainty now, her hands adjusting bolts, tracing wires, and exposing a hidden flaw that none of the engineers had admitted to seeing. With one swift motion, she revealed a component deliberately misaligned, small enough to be overlooked but fatal to the system. Gasps rippled through the room. It was proof. This failure wasn't chance. Someone wanted the engine dead. Edward's face tightened, his pride slipping as the workers muttered among themselves. Clara's voice cut through the noise, calm but unyielding. This was done on purpose. And whoever did it wanted everyone here to believe it was impossible to fix. The senior engineer who had spoken earlier paled, his confidence cracking as people's eyes shifted toward him. He stammered, searching for excuses, but the silence pressed harder than any question. Clara turned back to the engine, her hands moving quickly now, every adjustment deliberate. Sparks flickered, gears clicked, and then, with a deep rumble, the machine roared back to life. The crowd erupted in disbelief and awe. Workers cheered, some clapping, others standing frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Edward, stripped of his smirk, could only stare as the impossible engine came alive under the touch of the woman he had mocked. The hierarchy he had built, the image he held of himself, all of it wavered in that moment. But before the room could settle, Clara's eyes narrowed again. She had noticed something deeper, a flaw hidden beneath the surface. The engine was running, but its design carried another secret, a weakness that could bring the company down if left untouched. The celebration froze mid-cheer, the revelation hanging heavy. The battle was won, but the war, it seemed, had only just begun. The cheers faded into uneasy quiet as Clara spoke again, her steady tone carrying more weight than the roar of the engine. She explained that while the machine now worked, its design had been rushed, leaving hidden faults that could cost the company everything if ignored. What looked like brilliance on paper was, in truth, fragile beneath the surface. Edward, who had spent months boasting about this project, found himself with nothing to say. His arrogance had blinded him not only to sabotage, but also to the flaws within his own leadership. The senior engineer, exposed for tampering, had no defense left. The workers who had once feared him now turned their backs, the truth too clear to ignore. Clara had not only fixed the impossible engine, but also revealed the cracks in the company's foundation, both mechanical and human. For the first time, the power in the room shifted. The people saw that knowledge and skill were not bound by titles, and respect could not be demanded by fear. Clara, however, didn't revel in victory. She simply wiped the grease from her hands and stepped back, reminding everyone that her goal had never been to embarrass anyone. It was to make the machine live again. Her humility left an even stronger impression than the brilliance of her work. Some whispered that she had saved the future of the company. Others wondered what else she could achieve if given the chance. Edward stood silent, his pride wounded, but his mind turning. He had dared her as a joke, but now he was forced to face the truth. Genius can wear simple clothes, and brilliance can come from the most unexpected places. And as Clara walked away, the lesson remained clear. Never underestimate the quiet ones, for they may carry the power to change everything.